some credibility. It makes people think it's been well researched, that these claims have been looked into and verified in some kind of way. So, you know, when a documentary gets made, it's almost like, well, this is a telling of the truth, isn't it?
It's hard, isn't it, because he's dead, so he can't defend himself. Perhaps victims feel more comfortable coming out after their alleged abuser has passed. But I just got to thinking, I mean, we were talking about that in our household. I mean, the music, just the music, iconic, and music that we both love and have loved for decades. So the question we have in our family is, what do we do with those CDs?
You got to get rid of them. Look, was a massive Bill Cosby fan because I'm a stand-up comedian and I grew up in the 80s and 90s. And I challenge that there are a lot of people who watched The Cosby Show in the 80s and, you know, it spoke to them on more than just a comedic, entertaining level. And we got none of his stuff in the house now. We got, you know, and won't listen to his stuff. At some point, you've got to accept that the crime is so big that legacy does not deserve to be there.
Yeah.
Jenny, what do you think? I mean, those songs.
I know, but there will be, he's the hero to a lot of people, or you know, the ultimate artist, and there will be people who just will refuse to believe that these stories are true, and they will continue to listen to his music and buy albums or songs through iTunes or whatever. But you know, making a great song does not excuse you from if you have abused and assaulted, particularly in this case, children. And it's just as, you know, being a lovely religious leader doesn't absolve you from the same kind of crimes. The crime, as James says, just outweighs the legacy.
Very interesting. Just finally, before, and it's been a great panel to both of you, Jenny and James, touch on this. How do you feel about hyphenated names? Alex Liddington Cox writes an Essential Baby that his child will be taking their mum's surname because of the hell of having a double-barrelled surname. Aside from the drama of online forms and administrative nightmares, he says there's also the problem of meeting a future partner who also has a double-barrelled surname. Then what? So if you've got a name like Cox, there are other playground problems and bullying to consider, and then there's the question of why babies tend to have their father's last names anyway. In this day and age, what's wrong with their mother's name? So, panellists, you have both single surnames. Would you be okay with a hyphenated name, James?
Yes. It's the more the merrier. I want a big, long... I got James as a first name. I want all the letters in the last name.
Yeah.
James Nokise Lipswitch.
Lipswitch, Everton, Randolph, Tusitala.
You're a fan of the hyphenated.
Oh, get it in there. As many as possible. Quadruple-barreled names.
Yes.
Jenny?
Well, I have 3 Christian names. And
you what?
I have 3 Christian names. So I have, you know, a first name, a middle name, and a second middle name. And so when I got... Oh, okay. They're Jennifer and...
You don't have to tell us. You don't have to tell us.
No, I'm Jennifer and Therese. And it's lovely that I have Therese because I'm adopted. Teresa was my birth name, and my parents chose to bring it into my name so that I would have that part of me. So it's lovely that I have 3 Christian names. But I didn't want a double-barrelled surname. I took my husband's name when I got married. Regret it a little bit now, but I didn't like my maiden name. So it seemed like a good idea at the time.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Jenny Morton, thank you so much for being on the panel this afternoon. And James Nokise, likewise. And I'm back. I'm Wallace Chapman, back at bright and early, 3:45 p.m. tomorrow. See you later.
Ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's program, Kiwi Mark Taylor, aka the bumbling jihadi who joined Islamic State in Syria, is now in a Kurdish jail after surrendering because it was all just a bit too hard. No food, no money, no slave. Scalpers beware, the government is coming for you with plans for a price cap on resale tickets. 14 people are dead after tornadoes ripped through the southern US state of Alabama. That number is expected to rise. And the winner of the New Zealand Golf Open was photographed draped in what some describe as a couch rug. New Zealand Golf reckons it's a kurawai. Who's right? You can watch us on Sky Channel 83 and Freeview Channel 50. But first, the news. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says the Islamic State recruit Mark Taylor has been repeatedly told New Zealand cannot help him get travel documents to come home. Mr Taylor, a former New Zealand infantryman, converted to Islam while living in Brisbane and in 2014 went to live with Islamic State in Syria. He has now been tracked down in a Kurdish prison. Ms Ardern says New Zealand does not have diplomatic representation in Syria and so is severely limited in its ability to assist him.
We have consistently told Mark Taylor that we cannot help him obtain a travel document. He would need to make his own way to a country where New Zealand has consular representation, something that in his current situation will be difficult to do.
Jacinda Ardern says New Zealand has a plan in place in case any Islamic State supporters come home, and she's confident the public can be kept safe. The government plans to crack down on ticket scalpers with a proposal to cap the price at which people can resell tickets and to ban ticket buying bots. The Prime Minister and the Commerce Minister, Chris Farfoy, made the announcement this afternoon saying they are seeking feedback from the public. The Commerce Commission has received more than 400 complaints since 2017 about the world's largest ticket reseller, Viagogo. Jacinda Ardern says tickets for a local musical production of Blood Brothers were recently advertised on the website for $105 more than the $30 face value price. She says it's unfair that people are profiting while the arts and culture sector is shortchanged and consumers are being scammed. Dame Jenny Shipley has retired from the board of China Construction Bank New Zealand. Last week, the High Court ruled the former Prime Minister and other directors breached their duty in allowing the construction company Mainzeal to trade recklessly before it collapsed in 2013. Dame Jenny was the chair of China Construction Bank New Zealand, a China subsidiary that has Reserve Bank approval to operate in this country. She has released a statement saying she believes it is in the best interests of the company that she retires from the board as of March 31st, the end of the current reporting cycle. At least 14 people have been killed after several tornadoes slammed into the US state of Alabama, destroying numerous homes. Emergency workers have worked into the night, pulling bodies and the injured out of the rubble of homes and businesses in Lee County, east of the state capital, Montgomery. The Lee County coroner, Bill Harris, says the death toll is likely to rise in the coming hours.
We've got 14 confirmed dead at this time. I expect that number to go higher. We will probably be here through the night. They're just having trouble getting into these roads and driveways because of the devastation. So it's just going to be a long nighter, and I've had families start to show up now where they can't find anybody.
The National Weather Service says the first tornado to strike had winds of up to 266 kilometres per hour. Just 11% of victims of crime report having a positive experience with the justice system. Now, that's according to a new survey that's been released at a workshop attended by 160 victim advocates and experts in Wellington today. Prior to the workshop, a survey was conducted asking victims for their opinion of the justice system. The Chief Victims Advisor, Kim McGregor, says 57% of more than 600 victims surveyed said they'd had a bad experience. That doesn't surprise the Green Party MP Jan Logie.
It is a real call for us to do better, that we want a justice system that lives up to its name, and it's not at the moment.
Jan Logie says victims will be at the centre of the justice system reform. Ongoing dry and hot conditions in central Otago mean farmers may impose water restrictions on themselves. Met Service is predicting the conditions to continue this week, with Alexandra expected to top 30 degrees Celsius tomorrow. Federated Farmers Otago High Country Chair Andrew Patterson says farmers have benefited from a good spring with plenty of feed in storage. However, dry conditions are starting to take hold, and that will have effects in the area.
Rationing always affects us. It just means for dairy farming operations, your production will drop a bit. For sheep farming operations, a lot of the ones with hill country, it's not so much of an issue because you just push the sheep up onto the mountain, but flatter, more intensive operations, it will affect them.
Andrew Patterson says farmers are watching their water supplies and are beginning to use storage. People wanting to buy certain cough medicines will have to give their name and address to the pharmacist first. The government last month reclassified several commonly used medicines with the cough suppressant dextromethorphan. They can now only be obtained after speaking to the pharmacist or with a doctor's prescription. A Ministry of Health manager, Chris James, says the products have been taken off the shelf because of the potential to be abused. He says the decision should not cost people more unless they decide to get a prescription. It is 5:05. To sport now, the All Black Sevens have slipped from the top of the competition standings after having to settle for third at the latest round of the World Series in Las Vegas. New Zealand were beaten by the eventual winners, United States, 24-19 in the semis, after the US scored a try on the final hooter to break the 19-all deadlock. It's the third time the US have beaten New Zealand at the semi-final stage this season. The home side then went on to trounce Samoa 27-0 in the final. In the bronze medal match, the All Blacks beat Argentina 26-19 after trailing 19-7 midway through the second half. The United States now has a 5-point lead at the top of the overall standings, with New Zealand second and Fiji third. Meanwhile, the chief executive of World Rugby says criticism of a proposed World League is inaccurate. World Rugby has been under fire since the emergence last week of plans for a 12-team competition that didn't include Fiji, Samoa or Tonga. But Brett Gosper maintains there is no intention of shutting out the Pacific nations, although World Rugby chairman Sir Bill Beaumont has called for an emergency meeting in Dublin at the end of the month to discuss the proposal. The Warriors have ensured they'll keep Isaac Luke for the entirety of the NRL Rugby League season after the hooker agreed to an upgraded contract. Reports have suggested Parramatta was chasing the 31-year-old's services. Luke re-signed on a cut price deal late last year, but only after a handshake agreement that he could leave if another club approached with a better offer. And that's the news.
Pulling strings.
I'm a puppet for nobody. I will stand up, first and foremost, for Auckland.
Shifting goalposts.
But we're not in an election year. We've got small parties popping up. I think that's who it will help, by the way, because the Green Party's actually achieved the 5% threshold.
And firing shots.
I'm telling you now, as I sit here, they won't do those exemptions.
Here, there and everywhere on air. Morning Report, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, the Northland School paying for its pupils' vaccinations against meningococcal disease. And after 10, reckless alarmist or realist? David Wallace-Wells on why we need to frighten people about climate change. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. For Northland to Wellington, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Fine apart from areas of morning and evening cloud. Gisborne to Wairarapa, fine weather. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine apart from some cloud about the coastal Canterbury areas until late this afternoon. Bulla and Westland, cloud increasing. Rain developing south of the glaciers this afternoon and spreading elsewhere late today or tomorrow. Otago and Southland mainly fine, with high cloud especially tomorrow. However, scattered rain about the coastal Southland and Clutha areas from this evening, becoming confined to Stewart Island tomorrow. Fiordland, rain developing this afternoon with heavy falls easing later tomorrow. Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy, chance of a light shower. It's coming up to 11 past 5 and you're listening to RNZ National.
And this is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. A former New Zealand soldier who joined Islamic State and was dubbed the bumbling jihadi is being held in a Syrian prison after surrendering to Kurdish forces. Mark Taylor, who's originally from Hamilton, says he has some regrets about his time in the so-called caliphate, such as not being able to afford a slave. Taylor earned the nickname the bumbling jihadi after he revealed his location with geo-tagged tweets in 2015. He also claims he was a border guard for IS. The ABC's Middle East correspondent Adam Harvey went to meet him and filed this report.
Inside a Kurdish prison, New Zealander Mark Taylor tries to explain why he stayed with the Islamic State group until the 11th hour.
actually began liking living in the Islamic State, seeing a different type of way of life.
The former New Zealand Army infantryman converted to Islam while living in Brisbane. He says Australia cancelled his visa in 2010 because of suspected links to extremist groups, and in 2014 he finally made it to IS in Syria. He says he initially taught English, but was under suspicion as a spy, and to prove himself was told to make a video urging IS sympathisers to conduct attacks on police officers and soldiers.
I actually did regret making that video, and I know that the output was not good for my part, but I know I probably spent time in jail for making that video.
He claims to have met few Australians in Syria other than IS recruiter Neil Prakash. Taylor also claims he wasn't a fighter for the group.
I was helping to guard a border between the Syrian government and which was the territory of the Islamic State.
So you're armed, you had a weapon?
I had a Kalashnikov.
And did you use it?
Only for practice.
His main criticism of IS is over the way it treated him.
And the last time they put me in prison was for a ridiculous reason. It's because I was accused of drinking alcohol and making alcohol and smoking hashish.
The other regret of his IS years is of not being able to afford a slave. Captured Yazidi women were sold in IS marketplaces.
If you could afford to buy a slave, what would you have had her do?
Clean the house. The thing is, it depends on the function of the slave. For example, if my wife owned the slave, I had no right at all to the slave whatsoever. But I had ownership to the lady, then it basically entitled me whatever I wanted to do, as long as within the Islamic Sharia.
To have sex with her?
Not forcefully, no. But it's more like a girlfriend-boyfriend relationship.
She was there forcefully. She would have been there forcefully. She was taken from her community and forced, on pain of death, to come and live in the Islamic State. Everything she did would have been forcefully, wouldn't it?
Well, as far as I'm aware, that's really not my concern. Because, as I said, to buy a lady costs money. And I would see from day to day, I would go to the masjid, for example, and someone would say to me, I bought a slave for like 5,000, 10,000. And I'm thinking to myself, I would like to have that type of money myself, but I never had the chance. So I had to stick to being married to a Syrian lady.
No one's quite sure what will happen to Taylor now. The Kurds don't want him or the other imprisoned foreign IS fighters and have asked their home nations to take them back and put them on trial there.
And that was Adam Harvey in northern Syria. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says New Zealand cannot help Mark Taylor, known as the Kiwi jihadi, get consular help to come home while he is in Syria. She told her post-cabinet media conference a short time ago that New Zealand does not have diplomatic representation in Syria and so is severely limited in its ability to assist him.
That is why we made it very clear from the outset, no New Zealander should travel to Syria. We have consistently told Mark Taylor that we cannot help him obtain a travel document. He would need to make his own way to a country where New Zealand has consular representation, something that in his current situation will be difficult to do. All New Zealand citizens have rights under international and domestic law. Mr. Taylor only holds New Zealand citizenship, and the government has an obligation not to make people stateless.
Jacinda Ardern is assuring the public that if Mark Taylor were to get help to return to New Zealand, he would not be a threat.
We have long had plans in place in the event that a New Zealand citizen supporting ISIS in Syria were to return. It would involve a comprehensive response and management plan for any individual. The safety of New Zealand and New Zealanders is our priority. Contingency planning has been underway for some time involving the New Zealand Police and other agencies. I am confident we have the means to keep New Zealanders safe in this case. I reiterate again, While I cannot talk about the specifics of this case, I am confident we have the means to keep New Zealanders safe. Bringing terrorists to justice is something the government takes extremely seriously. As I've said before, any New Zealander suspected of association with terrorist groups should expect to be investigated under New Zealand law should they return. The police have powers under a number of acts, and I am assured they will utilise them.
If Mark Taylor does manage to seek assistance and obtain the correct travel documents, Ms Ardern confirmed he would still find it hard to get on a plane to New Zealand, given his status as a sympathiser to Islamic State. She says New Zealand would not pay for him to return. At least 14 people, including children, have died after a tornado swept through Lee County in the state of Alabama, destroying hundreds of homes. Here's Lee County Sheriff Jay Jones a short time ago.
The storm appears to have at least a quarter-mile wide, probably more. We'll know more tomorrow, of course, and we're talking several miles that it traveled on the ground. The damage is significant. I would put it in the category of catastrophic based on the destruction of the homes we've seen. I can say that at this time we have 14 confirmed fatalities. And again, the search continues. We still have some people that are reported missing. We have not identified all of the fatalities yet at this point, but we're continuing, of course, to take care of that. We also have had several individuals that have been transported that were injured to the hospital, some of them with very serious injuries. But again, at this point, our efforts are geared towards search and rescue.
That's Lee County Sheriff Jay Jones speaking to the media in Alabama a short time ago. Meteorologist James Spann, who is based in Birmingham, Alabama, told me authorities will be working through the night to pull bodies and the injured out of the rubble.
What happens, the National Weather Service sends survey teams in to assess the damage. We have a scale to rank tornadoes that runs from 0 to 5. The weakest tornado is an EF0. The biggest is an EF5. The tornado in Lee County, Alabama, that killed 14 people, the preliminary rating is EF3, but they've not had a chance to see the entire tornado track because it's dark now. Once the sun comes up tomorrow morning, they'll finish the survey. But this inevitably will be either an EF3 or an EF4 tornado, which would represent wind velocities in excess of 150 miles per hour. That's pretty violent.
Wow. So are we talking flattened houses here? Have people been killed by being caught in structures that have collapsed?
We'll know more about exactly how the people died later. I would imagine that some of them are in manufactured housing or mobile homes. Those are not safe during a tornado, and you've got to be out of them. And while there was an excellent warning, sometimes people don't hear them. But we don't know that yet. I would imagine we probably had some loss of life, maybe in vehicles. That the worst conceivable place to be during a tornado, it's an automobile or a mobile home, a manufactured home. So I would imagine some of the fatalities would come from one of those two places. But again, we don't know. This just happened a few hours ago, so we're still in the fact-finding phase of this now.
Very much understood that it is a situation that is still unfolding. You mentioned the good warning system. How much warning did people have, and did they realise how bad it was going to be?
There was a tornado watch about 2 hours in advance, and that's issued by a branch of the National Weather Service called the Storm Prediction Center, and that's to let people know that conditions are just right for tornadoes. And then about 20 minutes before the tornado touched down at that spot, there was a tornado warning. That's the message that says there is a tornado down. You need to do something now. Go to a small room, lowest floor, near the center, away from windows. No cars, no mobile homes. So they had about 20 to 25 minutes lead time on the actual tornado warning, which is plenty of time to get to a safe place. And inevitably, some people don't hear the warnings, which is regrettable, but sometimes people just don't hear them. But then again, most people do. And we are at the start of our spring tornado season. We've started spring here in the United States. And in my part of the country, our core tornado season is the months of March, April, and May. So having tornadoes in March, it's not that unusual. But again, sometimes we still have loss of life. It's very tragic. We know that some of those that died were children. Some were adults. We'll know much more tomorrow morning when we get the word back from the coroner.
When you say they had these warnings maybe 25 minutes before, the very severe warning, how's that put out? Is it over the radio? Is it via text message? Or how does the message get across?
Well, like we've done for years and years, we go live on television. We interrupt whatever programming is on the air and go with continuous weather coverage. So, and all the local television stations do that. So for people that are watching local television, they will see the coverage that way. But we are fully aware that a lot of people watch Netflix and Amazon Prime and other sources now, and we prefer for every home to have a weather radio. Most people in my state do. It's a small radio that's like a smoke alarm. If there's a tornado warning, an alarm sounds in your house. And on top of that, everybody's got a cell phone now. And most people with a cell phone should get the warning that way. In the United States, we have a service called Wireless Emergency Alerts, or WEA. And by default, you receive tornado warnings here. So in theory, most people should have heard the warning. But if by chance your phone's turned off or you don't have a phone or maybe you're taking a nap, sometimes people don't hear it. The greatest problem we have is the siren mentality. There's some people that believe they're going to hear an outdoor warning siren, and those have never been effective at reaching people inside a building. Never. They reach a few people outdoors. So we encourage people never rely on a siren. Be sure that you've got WEA on your phone, have a weather radio in your house, and just kind of pay attention. If the weather's dangerous, it's spring, just be aware of the circumstances.
And ticket scalpers, beware, the government is coming for you. A planned crackdown would see prices on resale tickets capped and the banning of so-called ticket buying bots, which allow professional scalpers to buy up large numbers of tickets online. It follows recent complaints from consumers about ticket scalping, with the Commerce Commission receiving more than 400 complaints about the website Viagogo since 2017. Commerce and Consumer Affairs Minister Chris Faafoi joins me now. Hi, Minister. How are you going to cap prices? How would that work?
The experience across the Tasman with New South Wales in the last 12 months, they've recently introduced a cap of, I think it is 10% above the face value of the ticket price. So that's in its early days, so we'll be watching that very closely. But they are pretty much having the same issues that we are experiencing here in New Zealand, Lisa. So we're certainly open to that option, as well as information disclosure, as you say, the banning of bots, and looking at the structure of the ticket selling market as well.
Well, let's look at the cap on prices, because that is one of the significant things that you're looking at. In this report that you've got, it said that price caps have not worked well overseas, despite some jurisdictions imposing them. So what makes you think a price cap would work in New Zealand?
Well, I hope it would do something in terms of trying to stop what is going on now, but it's not alone. Information disclosure as well, making sure people know the information about the tickets that they might be buying. I think certainly that's been one of the issues that we've seen. There's some people going to these resale sites, buying tickets unseen, and either they're fake or they're not the tickets that they hoped they were. So price is but one issue, but the big issue, I think, is the volume of tickets that are being bought and sold on some resale websites that are purporting to be the official reseller and then selling to the average punter at exorbitant prices. So price is just one avenue that we're looking at, but I think it's going to be a significant avenue to give, I think, consumers some peace of mind that they're going to be paying what we hope to be a fair price.
It is one avenue, but it's one of the avenues you highlighted in your press statement. Also, in this report, it says that it's difficult to enforce a price cap. How would you enforce it?
If you look at the likes of Trade Me, for example, we've had them in, and it wouldn't be too difficult if someone was legitimately trying to sell their ticket, that they'd have to put a new form together to make sure that if the ticket price on the face of it was $100, then the maximum it would be able to sell for would be somewhere close to $110.
So who would verify the face value of the ticket before it went up on a site like Trade Me? Who's going to do that administration?
And that's where the information disclosure would come in with the likes of Trade Me. When they're selling the ticket, you'd have to, for example, and hypothetically put in the ticket, the seat, and the price, and that could be something that consumers, the sellers would have to click when they're doing it via the likes of a Trade Me website. But again,
it sounds it sounds complicated.
No, I don't think it is, to be fair. I think clicking a few buttons if you're wanting to sell a ticket doesn't sound that complicated to me, to make sure that we can have some more peace of mind and fairness for consumers who at the moment are, in some instances paying, 200% over the face value and getting ripped off. It seriously doesn't sound that complicated to me, Lisa.
Minister, I'm wondering how you will well, prevent a price cap from pushing people onto overseas websites to purchase their tickets? Because that is the experience overseas, isn't it? That people start to use, they get driven to overseas websites to circumvent the cap. And it's harder to enforce.
And that is the issue as we speak, Lisa. They're being driven to the likes of Viagogo, who are using bots to sell tickets because they've got the volume of tickets at rather large margins. So
but the point is, this advice to you, Minister, sorry to interrupt, but the point is the advice to you indicates that a price cap is likely to lead to scalping activity happening on offshore websites instead, to get around the price cap.
And that's where, Lisa, the supply issue becomes an issue, and stopping the use of bots, those resale sites having the ability to hoover up a large amount of tickets, usurping the technology that is already there, which isn't working, and then again selling a large volume of tickets at extremely exorbitant prices isn't doing anyone any favours. So if you cut down the ability of those resale websites to get their hands on the tickets, there's no point in a consumer in New Zealand going to one of them because they simply won't have any.
So you're wanting to shut down ticket buying bots. So how prevalent are these bots in New Zealand?
Quite prevalent. We've certainly had a meeting, I think it was with Ticketmaster last year, and they said that the New Zealand market certainly had the same experience as they've had worldwide. I think it was Ticketmaster has said last year that worldwide they had about 5 billion blocks of bot attempts to get their hands on tickets. So,
but in New Zealand specifically, because you can only legislate for this country, so how prevalent are ticket buying bots? Because I'm looking at this report to you and it says we have little or no information about how prevalent ticket buying bots might be in New Zealand. So is it an issue? And
that information is held by the likes of Ticketmaster, and the information that we've got from them is that annually they have 5 billion attempts by bots that they've blocked to try and get their hands on tickets. And again, they have told us that their experiences that New Zealand isn't necessarily not struck by this experience as well. So making sure that those bots can't get their hands on the likes of the tickets that we're talking about is a crucial part of the puzzle to make sure that those resale sites can't get the supply that they have and then reselling at the profit margins that we've been talking about.
Minister, just very quickly before you go, when would you like to have this sorted by?
The discussion document is out till April. We hope to have it wrapped up pretty clearly because we've got a pretty clear policy direction within the paper and then some legislation through the House by the end of the parliamentary term.
Thanks for joining us this evening, Minister Chris Farfoy there, talking about ways to get around ticket scalping, and he's hoping to bring in new legislation to stop that. We are keen for your feedback, particularly on the ticket scalping. Do you think a clampdown would work? You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is 28 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. And when triumphant Aussie golfer Zach Murray took out the New Zealand Open at the weekend, a delighted Murray posed for photographers kissing his giant silver trophy, his shoulders draped in, well, that's the problem. We're not quite sure what it was that was draped across him. New Zealand Golf says it's a korowai or Māori cloak. Social media and others haven't been so kind, describing it as a chunk of faux fur from Spotlight or a couch rug topped with rooster feathers. Well-known weaver Veranoa Hettit was weaving while I spoke to her this afternoon, and she says she's also a serious golf fan, so she was watching with the whānau when Murray was cloaked in this thing that horrified her.
I could tell straight away that it was a piece of faux fur that you can buy from Spotlight or Kmart or the Warehouse. I can tell at a glance. I've been weaving 4 years now, and I know when a cloak is real and it's not real.
So New Zealand Golf did describe it as a korowai and do describe it as a korowai. What would you say to them?
Get your terms right. That's all I ask, that the terminology be the proper terminology be used. And in that way, a real korowai isn't belittled or undermined, or the weaver isn't belittled. It's just using the right terms.
So if it's not a korowai and shouldn't be called a korowai, what would you call it?
there are different types of cloaks, and they all come under the umbrella term of kākahu, which nowadays is also the word used for clothing. So all of the different types of cloaks come under this umbrella term, and the different cloaks are named according to what adorns them. So, for example, a cloak that has kiwi feathers adorning the body of it is called a kahu kiwi. A cape or a cloak that is used when it's raining is called a hieke. So all of these different cloaks have different names according to their use and according to what they're made out of. Now, because this piece that was used yesterday was sewn, obviously sewn, I don't have a traditional term that I can put to it.
Did you recognise the feathers on it?
They look like rooster feathers to me.
So, again, New Zealand Golf says it's been using this item of clothing, we'll call it, for the past decade. They couldn't tell us anything off the top of their head about where it was made or where it came from, but it had been blessed by Ngāi Tahu. Does that make any difference to the way you feel about this item?
Not at all. Not at all. It doesn't make a difference at all. I've seen those things in souvenir shops. And you can bless it as much as you like. It's not going to change its name.
What do you think of the fact that this was, well, a moment on the world stage? This was the winner of the New Zealand Open, and it is possibly a picture that will go all around the world.
I'm horrified and I'm embarrassed as a weaver. There are so many beautiful, accomplished weavers in New Zealand that could create something fitting or be fitting a winner of the New Zealand Golf Open. And yet they chose to present him with something that was below par, excuse the pun. Either do not use it or find a weaver who is able to create something that has a story that is specific to their competition, that has meaning and that holds mana in its very fabric and its very makeup.
So do you think they've tried to slide this one past us?
I have had a few words running through my head, and one of them was tokenism. That was one word that I had in my mind. Appropriation or misappropriation. I tried today not to think too much about it because I find it really upsetting. And so I'm finding it a bit hard to answer that question. Sorry, Lisa.
But inappropriate, obviously, in your view, that they should use this item in this way and call it a korowai.
Yes, and I think it's quite insulting, not only to weavers, not only to the art, this very ancient art form that has been practiced for centuries in my whānau, but it's an insult to the winner.
Do you know if anyone's complained about this before? Have you complained since you saw it?
Well, actually, one of my relations, Ata Te Kanawa, who was a daughter of the master weaver Tiggeries Te Kanawa, she saw the same cloak being used a couple of years ago, and she wrote to Michael Hill, she wrote to the New Zealand Golf Association, and she didn't get a response. So this isn't the first time that it's been brought up, and it's not the first time that New Zealand Golf has been made aware that Māori people are unhappy, especially Māori weavers are unhappy about it.
What about the person who might have whipped it up on their sewing machine on a Sunday afternoon? What do you say to them?
Well, you know, yeah, I've thought about that person too, and maybe this person was needing to make things quickly so that she could feed her family. And so karo hakiaya, you know, I think of that person. And this is no slight on her. I just want that to be known. It's a slight on New Zealand Golf, really, for calling it a korowai.
That was Verenoa Hatet, who is a weaver, talking about that, well, it's what New Zealand Golf calls a korowai. She says it's, well, it's not. Coming up on on Checkpoint on RNZ National. Why you will need a prescription to get some cough medicines. We'll tell you which ones. Farmers in central Otago look at voluntarily restricting water use as hot, dry conditions continue. And residents of the small King Country town of Bennydale signed a petition calling for a name change. So why are there almost twice as many signatures as residents? We would love your feedback. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us, Checkpoint, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. But first, here's Susanna. She's in Wellington today, and she's got the headlines.
The Prime Minister says the Islamic State recruit Mark Taylor has been repeatedly told New Zealand cannot help him get travel documents to return to this country. The former New Zealand infantryman converted to Islam while living in Australia and in 2014 went to live with Islamic State in Syria. He is now in a Kurdish prison. Jacinda Ardern says New Zealand does not have diplomatic representation in Syria and so is severely limited in its ability to assist him. The government plans to crack down on ticket scalpers with a proposal to cap the price at which people can resell tickets. The Commerce Commission has received more than 400 complaints since 2017 about the world's largest ticket reseller, Viagogo. The Commerce Minister, Chris Farfoy, told Checkpoint he has heard of people paying 200% more than the face value of tickets, and it's a matter of fairness for consumers. The government is seeking feedback from the public. Dame Jenny Shipley has announced she's retiring as chair of China Construction Bank New Zealand at the end of the month. Last week, political questions were being asked about whether Dame Jenny's position was tenable after a High Court ruling about the failed construction company Mainzeal. The court found the former Prime Minister and other directors were liable for trading while insolvent. Rescue teams in the US state of Alabama expect the death toll from a tornado to keep rising as they sift through the rubble of destroyed homes and businesses. At least 22 people are now confirmed to have died when the tornado swept through Lee County, and dozens more were injured. The local sheriff says the challenge for rescue workers is the sheer volume of the debris they're dealing with. People wanting to buy certain cough medicines will have to give their name and address to a pharmacist first. The government last month reclassified several commonly used medicines with the cough suppressant dextromethorphan. They can now only be obtained after speaking to the pharmacist or with a doctor's prescription. The number of measles cases in Canterbury has climbed to 7, with 2 more people catching the potentially fatal disease. Those are the headlines. Our next news update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. And Nona Peltier is in the studio to talk business. Nona, the Commerce Commission, it's released some submissions that were made by the fuel companies. This is all part of their look into pricing, is it?
That's right. So they're looking at all aspects of what leads to the prices that consumers are paying at the pump. And so they've released the initial submissions they received from the industry, about, I think there was 11, in fact. And we spoke with Z Energy about their submission, which basically said, yeah, our margins have increased because in the past the margins are so low the business itself wasn't viable. And if you look at where we've gone since then, is you'll see there's a lot more service stations available for consumers to use and so on. So they're saying, look, the model we had before was broken. Yes, it's costing more, but at least we have a profitable industry now. And that's the initial submissions. We're going to hear a lot more about this. This isn't even the interim report yet, and we expect a final report by the end of this year. So this is going to go on for some time. Meanwhile, the Commerce Commission has put the fuel industry to work, answering a lot of questions.
Yeah, it does seem like the never-ending story, but we will wait and see what comes out of it. OK, union representatives, they want wages to go up for retail workers. About 18,000 of them, is it?
Yeah, so there's about, maybe about almost like 250,000 around that, retail, people working in retail, and that's all kinds of jobs, from those that you meet at the checkout all the way to the, the back end of the office and so on. So this is the retail industry more generally. However, about 18,000 workers are paid the minimum wage, which is $16.50. Now, that's going up to $20 an hour in the next 2 years, so by 2021. Meanwhile, though, the union representing the retail workers at larger retail outlets, say the Warehouse, for example, the union is called First Union. They saying, look, we've got a lot of workers out there that are just earning $16.50. Just pay them the living wage now, which is $20.20 an hour. Because really, a lot of people are seeing this as a career. The retailers are saying, yeah, but you know what? We haven't been able to pass these costs on to consumers, so retailers are absorbing it. That might work for the larger ones, but for the smaller ones, it's not so easy. And we're going to see a lot more pushback here, I think. One of the things that we're seeing from retailers is that the smaller ones particularly are looking at cutting back on their workforce to cover the costs, because some of them are not even able to break enough of profit to pay themselves the minimum wage, never mind their workforce. So we'll see what happens there. I think that you're going to see a lot more pressure in that sector. We've been seeing that for a while, low inflation and so forth. Yeah, I mean, that's going to carry on. Well, and, these wages are going up no matter what.
Market, Nona, anything of note that you need to point out?
Well, the market was actually really positive today because, the trade talks look like they're going forward. We've heard this before.
I was going to say, it is the barometer every day. No,
we're not going backwards. They're on the front foot at the moment, not on the back foot. So we'll see what happens there. The United States and China apparently are close to striking a deal on tariffs. We'll see what happens there. And so as a result, the market was a lot more perky today. We were up 0.2% by 62 points to 9,413. Now, on the dollar, it was a little bit of a different story. There's still some uncertainty there over which way the Federal Reserve in the United States are going to go with interest rates. That's still a big question mark. So our dollar is steady, really, at 68.1 US cents, 96 Australian and 51.4 pence.
Thank you, Nona. Nona Peltier with your business news there. Democrats in the US House of Representatives are stepping up investigations into possible obstruction of justice and abuse of power by President Donald Trump. The House Judiciary Committee will today issue demands to the White House and Justice Department for documents from more than 60 people and organisations. The CBC's Paul Hunter filed this report from Washington.
He is a racist. He is a con man.
For those who thought last week's testimony from Donald Trump's former personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, was damning,
in private, he is even worse.
Consider that for Trump, that was just the beginning. Democrats who'd long said they'd open all kinds of investigations into the president if they regained control of the House of Representatives are now doing precisely as promised.
Do you think the president obstructed justice?
Yes, I do. It's very clear that the president obstructed justice.
That's Democrat Gerald Nadler, who now runs the House Judiciary Committee on Capitol Hill, one of many set for deep dives on Trump. As he told the ABC program This Week today, here it comes.
Tomorrow, we will be issuing document requests to over 60 different people and individuals from the White House to the Department of Justice, Donald Trump Jr., to begin the investigations, to present the case to American people about obstruction of justice, corruption, and abuse of power.
The Judiciary Committee, by the way, is the one that would determine whether to try to impeach Donald Trump, though Nadler says they're still a long way from that at this point. Then there are all the others now at the starting gate. The Ways and Means Committee, which may go after Trump's tax returns. The Foreign Affairs Committee, interested in Trump's relationship with Vladimir Putin. And the House Intelligence Committee, which interviewed Cohen in private last week after his public testimony and will go at him again this coming week. Democrat Adam Schiff heads that one.
We're also looking at persistent allegations that the Russians have been laundering money through the Trump Organization. I don't know that that's true, but if it is, again, it's a profound compromise of this president.
At the big CPAC conference this weekend in Washington, conservatives rallied around the president, chanting anti-Hillary Clinton slogans again as Donald Trump ripped into the current and looming Democrat investigations.
So now they go and morph into, let's inspect every deal he's ever done. We're going to go into his finances. We're going to check his deals. We're going to check. These people are sick.
Suggesting Trump himself knows life is about to get a lot more complicated.
Paul Hunter reporting from Washington. A SpaceX rocket with a newly designed unmanned crew capsule has docked with the International Space Station. It is a key milestone for Elon Musk's space company and NASA's long-delayed goal to resume human spaceflight from US soil later this year. The mission reportedly went very smoothly, paving the way for human astronauts in a proposed mission in July. CBC's Austin Gravish reports.
3, 2, 1. 0. Ignition, liftoff.
It's a historic rocket launch that seems to have taken off without a hitch. Tarek Malik is the managing editor of Space.com. He was up early to see the SpaceX launch.
It was a spectacular launch for the thousands of people who flocked to the coast here, Florida Space Coast, to see it. It lit up the pre-dawn sky like a brilliant second sun.
Station Houston 1, we can confirm hard capture is complete.
Billionaire SpaceX CEO Elon Musk expressed relief to reporters following takeoff.
A little emotionally exhausted because that was super stressful. But it worked so far.
Crew Dragon is a spacecraft designed to deliver cargo and people to orbiting places. With seats for 7, astronauts could soon be on board. That is, if Crew Dragon can pass safety tests. For now, only a dummy named Ripley is strapped in. He's hooked up with sensors to capture how a flight would feel for humans. Toronto-based astronomer Ryan Marciniak says Crew Dragon could pave the way forward for space tourists.
We're definitely on the cusp of it. You still have to have a pretty deep pocket in order to afford one of those flights, but I'd say maybe closer to 10, 15 years, we'll be starting to look at getting you and I up there on the spacecraft for a nice little orbit of the Earth.
NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine praised the start of the new government-private partnership. NASA hasn't sent humans to space since 2011 when the Space Shuttle program ended.
What today really represents is a new era in spaceflight.
And NASA's Jim Bridenstine ending that report from the CBC. The days of grabbing cough medicine off the shelf are over, and GPs say it could make accessing them harder. Late last month, the Ministry of Health reclassified several commonly used cough medicines, so they have to be obtained from a pharmacist or with a prescription, not just off the shelf. Tess Brunton with this report.
I would, but it's pedantic. I think it's just because we're used to getting it from the supermarket that it's a big change.
I do because it works, but I do it begrudgingly.
Absolutely. It would be important that the pharmacist was open when I needed the medicine, though.
If I'm just going into a pharmacy, I don't think they should need to keep that sort of information.
Would you be prepared to go to the doctors and get a prescription?
It's a lot of effort for something that basically we've been able to do for a long time without having to go to so much trouble. So people have managed it up until now. I don't know why they have to essentially make such a drastic change.
I would, but only if I had to.
No, I think I'd probably put up with the cold and the flu.
As cold and flu season approaches, people will need to jump through more hoops to access cough medicine. Medicines containing cough suppressant dextromethorphan were taken off supermarket and pharmacy shelves on the 25th of February, following concerns they could be abused. G-Linctus is now only available after a trip to the doctors, while Vicks, Strepsils and Panadol cold and flu relief can only be bought after speaking with a pharmacist. Royal New Zealand College of General Practitioners Medical Director Dr Richard Medlicott says he doesn't think it will translate into more doctors' visits.
It's going to be harder to just browse the shelves and pick up these medicines as you see fit. You'll need to talk with a pharmacist. You could get a prescription from your doctor, but most people I don't think would go for the cost and difficulty of doing that. And it's not subsidised if we prescribe it anyway, so it's going to be less expensive to go straight to your pharmacy.
Ministry of Health MedSafe Group Manager Chris James says some cough medicines have been taken off the shelf, but they're still available.
Patients can still get access to the products, but after talking to their pharmacist about what symptoms they have, and then the pharmacist can have a think about, well, what are the best options for that patient? And if a cough and cold product that contains dextromethorphan is the best option, then the pharmacist can provide that.
He says they were taken off the shelf because the medicines had the potential to be abused. Mr James says the ministry doesn't have specific figures, but several concerns have been raised. Countdown Pharmacy Merchandise Manager Jeremy Arms says there hasn't been much reaction from the public about the decision, but that could change.
We're not in cough-cold season at the moment, but we're working very carefully with our suppliers and also getting some notices out into stores as quickly as we can, just to make customers aware that there have been some changes being legislated by the government and where they can purchase those medicines.
For now, if you have a cough, get ready to have a chat with your pharmacist before you get your medicine. For Checkpoint, Tess Brunton Tene.
The legal bills are racking up as Auckland Council effectively fights itself in a battle over a central Auckland development. The council and its development arm, Panuku, can't agree on an apartment and commercial block planned for Mount Eden and are opposing each other in the Environment Court. But only one is saying how much it's spent, Rowan Quinn reports.
Panuku says its bill for the Environment Court case now stands at $115,000. At stake is a commercial and residential development with about 100 homes on Dominion Road that it wants to develop. An independent panel of commissioners appointed by the Auckland Council refused Panuku permission to build last year, but Panuku appealed. The manager of the Dominion Road Business Association, Gary Holmes, says the situation is ridiculous.
We believe this sort of development is critically needed for our area. What we would rather see is, rather than the council fighting itself, is actually getting on and building the development.
The cost figures obtained by RNZ relate only to what Panuku has spent since lodging the Environment Court appeal and include about $48,000 on architectural expertise, $46,000 on legal fees and the rest on planning and staff time. Auckland Council, on the other hand, will not quantify its costs. It took 3 months to reply to RNZ's request for the information, only to say that it's not possible to break down legal costs because they're covered by a fixed fee arrangement that includes most of its regulatory work and isn't invoiced. The Business Association's Gary Holmes says all those costs could have been avoided if the two sides had just used common sense.
What would have helped if they'd actually made sure that all arms of council were aware of what was being proposed initially. They could have worked through any differences that they had and then put it forward as a united voice. And I think had they done that, we'd be a lot further ahead now.
The chair of the council's regulatory committee, Linda Cooper, says while there can always be improvements in how the various arms of council work together, fairness is critical. She says the council can't be seen to favour any of its own organisations. The same rules apply to private and public land.
People say it's ridiculous, but at the end of the day, would people think it was worse if we just did whatever we liked and didn't follow any rules? People would also be equally appalled about that.
Ms Cooper says the council appoints independent commissioners to make sure the decisions are fair, and it has to defend those decisions where needed.
Yes, it costs money, and we never want to be in that situation. We never want to be. We never want to be spending money on legal fees, but we also have a duty of care to the community quite often to get the outcomes that need to happen, but we can't ride roughshod through the rules to do that.
The chair of the Albert Eden Local Board, Peter Haynes, says the whole situation is incredibly frustrating. The board supports the development, just not the way Panuku plans to do it, including not building some affordable homes. He says Panuku sometimes acts just like any other big developer.
Is it just a developer acting, to maximise profits, and certain staff members adhere to that very strongly? Or being a council agency, does it have more than that? Is it supposed to have some social objectives?
The two sides are currently in a formal mediation process through the Environment Court. I Tamaki Makaurau mō te hōtaka o te ahi ko Rowan Quinn tēnei.
Farmers in central Otago may resort to voluntarily restricting their water use in the next week as the prolonged hot weather shows no sign of abating. There's plenty of feed locked away after a wet spring, but the ground is now brown and dry and there's not much rain on the horizon. Here's our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown.
If you speak to a cocky in this part of the country, they'll tell you they've seen worse. But that's the thing about stoic farmers in the dry climate of central Otago. There's always been a drier year or a neighbour whose lot is worse. But after what Federated Farmers Otago High Country Chair Andrew Patterson describes as a good spring, things are beginning to dry up. In fact, conditions last week prompted the Otago Regional Council to issue a call to farmers to watch water usage, reminding them that voluntary water restrictions were needed last year to prevent water takes being stopped.
Most years we do go to rationing, but I think with another week or two of hot weather we may be. But usually that period is quite short when we're getting at this part of the season.
Andrew Patterson says another issue for farmers in the area is the overabundance of growth that came from a good spring.
The country looks very brown, but there is actually quite a lot of tag, quite a lot of cover. Probably the biggest danger now with a real hot, dry period is fire. You can wind up with a situation like what happened in Tasman, so we don't want that, and people want to be careful.
A Met Service meteorologist, Tui McInnes, says there is little relief in sight.
Unfortunately, it's more of the same at the moment, hot and dry. As we go to next week, we've still got this high pressure sitting over us, and it keeps things still quite warm and generally a bit drier. We're looking like, as we go into week 3, that we could be setting up for maybe a wetter week, but there's too much uncertainty at this stage to know exactly how that's going to pan out. So for now, it's the continuation of the warm, dry, clear weather.
While that's not what farmers want to hear, Tui McInnes says it's good news for those wanting to enjoy an Indian summer after last week's cold spell. He says the mercury will top 30 degrees in parts of the South Island this week, including Alexandra and Central Otago. The Otago Regional Council did not respond to Checkpoint's interview requests, but in last week's warning pointed out low river levels can stress or kill aquatic life in river plants and cause algae growth. It's these issues which concern Forest and Birds freshwater conservation advocate Annabeth Cohen.
Some parts of the Lindis and Candrona are known to run dry in sections, but last year the Tyree River and the nearby Kyburn dropped to record lows. And this is in part due to the dry and warm conditions, which we can expect to increase with climate change, but it's also to do because there's too much irrigation in a dry region, which is causing groundwater aquifers to run low.
Annabeth Cohen says New Zealand needs to rethink how consents are issued, and a year-to-year basis may be more appropriate in future, especially in dry regions like Otago.
I know that the councils are reviewing some of the water consents, and they're also reviewing some of the minimum flow levels for these rivers. I think it'll be really important to take into account the effects of climate change, and we've got to be nimble to adjust how much water we're taking, because climate change means that the water that we've relied on in the past is not going to be in the same quantity and the same time of year available in the future.
Parts of the region's water plan are being reviewed at present, and the permits which allowed landowners to take water in parts of Central Otago under mining rights will cease in 2021. In Otago, for Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
A row has broken out in the small King Country town of Benidale over its official name. A request to change it to Te Mania Iti has been made to the Geographic Board by Iwi Ngāti Maniapoto, but now a petition opposing the name change has gathered nearly 300 signatures. That's almost double the town's population of about 170. Andrew McRae reports.
Benidale was created in the 1940s to house workers at a nearby coal mine. It was named after Mr Benny, the Under-Secretary of Mines, and Mr Dale, the mine superintendent. But while the name mash-up has served the town for nearly 8 decades, there are calls to change it. Keith Aiken from Ngāti Maniapoto says Te Mania Iti is the historic name for the area.
The question was raised about reclaiming the original name, and that's the context for this.
But the proposed change hasn't been welcomed by most locals. A petition against the idea was launched by Benidale resident Graham Reinhardt.
My father used to cut hay where the village is now, and of course when the village was actually started and constructed, it became Benidale from the ground up. All the houses and the trees and everything like that, that is Benidale. If they wanted to call it Mana Iti, that would actually only be the ground down.
Mr Reinhardt describes Benidale as his family's Turanga Waiwai,
which is our base, our home. I think the name should stay the same.
Brian Isaacs lived in the town all his life, and he's owned the local service station for over 30 years. He's opposed to any name change.
I don't see what the advantages of that. Because Benidale been Benidale as long as I can remember, so why does it have to change?
The Paul family has operated PGF Transport in Benidale since 1963. Chris Paul's against a name change because the history of the town is based on the former mine.
Mr Benny and Mr Dale, I think, I have no problem with renaming the surrounding areas, etc. But I really do believe Benidale should stay as Benidale. I think everyone can relate to it.
Vanessa Tahuia is principal of Benidale School. She says while she can understand points for and against a name change, her heart lies in the name Benidale.
My personal connection to this place is through my father, and he was really proud to say he was from Benidale, and that's what he knew.
She says changing the name doesn't seem right.
Change of that almost sort of takes away that historic history and the purpose of this town and how it was created. And my grandfather worked in the mines, and he knew the people, so to remove that is almost removing those links.
3 students at the school, 12-year-old Api, 10-year-old Soraya and 11-year-old James, also don't want to see the name of their town change.
Then no one will recognise it
I lived in Australia before this, but this is better than Australia.
Don't really think much. I think it shouldn't be changed because it kind of explains the original people who actually created Benidorm, Ben and Dale.
Because I've already got the hang of naming it Benidorm.
Keith Aiken from the Maniapoto Trust Board says it intends to carry out consultation with local residents.
Given that there has been, a petition and there has been questions raised by some members of the Benidorm community, I'd expect that we as a board would look to meet with those community members and understand what their views are on this issue.
The Geographic Board is due to first discuss the matter next month. For Checkpoint, ko Andrew McRae-Tene.
Do let us know what you think of that. You can text us on 2101 or tweet us at checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. After 6, we'll have more on ticket scalping.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, ko Susana Leatawa tēnei. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says the Islamic State recruit Mark Taylor has been repeatedly told New Zealand cannot help him to get travel documents to come home. Mr Taylor, a former New Zealand infantryman, converted to Islam while living in Brisbane and in 2014 went to live with Islamic State in Syria. He has now been tracked down in a Kurdish prison. Ms Ardern says New Zealand does not have diplomatic representation in Syria and so is severely limited in its ability to assist him. Meanwhile, Taylor says his biggest criticism of IS was the way they treated him.
And the last time they put me in prison was for a ridiculous reason. It's because I was accused of drinking alcohol and making alcohol and smoking hashish.
Taylor says his other regret during his time with IS was not being able to afford to buy a female slave. The government plans to crack down on ticket scalpers with a proposal to cap the price at which people can resell tickets to ban ticket buying bots. The Prime Minister and the Commerce Minister, Chris Farfoy, made the announcement this afternoon, saying they will now start seeking feedback from the public.
When you see stories of people who have put their hard-earned money into a gift or an event for a special occasion and they believe they've bought a ticket legitimately and they have not, or they've put in a huge outlay over and above the original ticket price, it's just not fair.
Jacinda Ardern says tickets for a local musical production of Blood Brothers were recently advertised on the website for $105 more than the $30 face value prices. Several tornadoes of Alabama and Georgia have killed at least 22 people and left many injured. Local authorities say the number of victims could rise sharply in the coming hours. The BBC's Nicholas Rocha reports.
The Sheriff of Alabama's Lee County, Jay Jones, told journalists 2 tornadoes had hit the region on Sunday afternoon, damaging homes, buildings and trees over a wide area. He said some children were among the dead. The county coroner, Bill Harris, said he expected the number of victims to rise as search crews combed through the rubble and debris. More than 35,000 people are without power in Alabama and Georgia. The full scope of the damage is still not known as severe weather persists across the region.
Nicholas Rocha reporting. Dame Jenny Shipley has announced she's retiring as chair of China Construction Bank New Zealand. She told her fellow directors she believed it's in the best interests of the company and is retiring from the board at the end of the month. Questions were being asked about whether her position was tenable after a High Court ruling about the failed construction company Mainzeal. Dame Jenny was a director of Mainzeal and the court found she and other directors liable for trading while insolvent. She says she intends to put her energy into personal and legal matters related to the Mainzeal case. The government says changes to how some cough medicines are sold shouldn't cost consumers more money. Several commonly used medicines containing the cough suppressant dextromethorphan have been reclassified and can only be obtained after speaking to a pharmacist or with a doctor's prescription. The Ministry of Health MedSafe Group Manager Chris James says the medicines were taken off the shelf because of the potential for them to be abused. He says the decision should not cost consumers more unless they decide to get a prescription.
consumers can go in and talk to their pharmacist and talk about, what symptoms they're having and what they've tried and what has worked and what hasn't worked. And then the pharmacist uses their professional judgment and experience and says, look, if this medicine's right for them, then they can go ahead and provide it.
Chris James from the Ministry of Health. Ongoing dry and hot conditions in central Otago mean farmers may impose their own water restrictions. Met Service is predicting the conditions will continue this week, with Alexandra expecting to top 30 degrees Celsius tomorrow. Timothy Brown reports.
Met Service says little relief is in sight for farmers experiencing another hot and dry summer in inland Otago. The cold spell that hit most of the country last week brought little rain to the region, and another tough fortnight lies ahead. The Otago Regional Council last week asked farmers to watch water usage and reminded them that voluntary water rostering was needed last year to prevent water takes being stopped. Federated Farmers Otago High Country Chair Andrew Patterson says farmers have benefited from a good spring with plenty of feed and storage. But dry conditions are starting to take hold, and he expects water rationing may begin in the next week. In Otago, Timothy Brown.
Fire and Emergency is warning people about the extreme fire danger in the Bay of Plenty region. It says crews, including helicopter crews, are on standby, and the risk along the coast and around Tauranga is due to tinder dry fuel. People are being urged to take extra care when doing any activity with the potential to create sparks, especially as tomorrow's forecast is windy. It's 6:05. The Chief Executive of World Rugby says criticism of the proposed World League is inaccurate. World Rugby has been under fire since plans emerged last week of a 12-team competition that didn't include Fiji, Samoa and Tonga. The Chief Executive, Brett Gosper, maintains there's no intention of shutting out the Pacific nations, although World Rugby Chairman Sir Bill Beaumont has called for an emergency meeting in Dublin at the end of the month to discuss the issue, as Barry Guy reports.
Beaumont's move comes after the International Rugby Players Council voiced concerns about player fatigue because of an increased program of internationals in the planned Global League. Beaumont reiterated that no decisions have been made amid concerns of the player welfare issue and the marginalising of the likes of the Pacific Islands and Georgia. World Rugby insists it is in support of a promotion-relegation system in the league, but the Six Nations remains opposed to the concept. Representatives from all Tier 1 countries, along with Fiji, Japan and the Players' Union, will gather in Dublin at the end of the month. This is Barry Guy.
Despite a first-up win, the coach, Yvette McCausland-Dury, says the Central Pulse will need to improve their defensive play if they are to overcome the Waikato Bay of Plenty Magic in their ANZ Premiership match in Rotorua tonight. The Pulse easily beat the Northern Mystics in their opening match of the season, while the Magic have had a win and a loss against the Tactics and the Northern Stars, respectively. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Will Pineapple explores the Austrian underground scene and its showpiece, the Erd Ball, a series of concerts and a complex of wine cellars and catacombs, which all appear to be happening at once. Our window on the world looks at efforts to repopulate rural Spain, and Peter Lamp assesses the weekend sport from his Palmerston North perspective on Nights of me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. For Northland through to Wellington, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Fine apart from areas of morning and evening cloud. Gisborne to Wairarapa, fine weather. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine apart from some cloud about coastal Canterbury late this afternoon. Bulla and Westland, cloud increasing, rain developing south of the glaciers this afternoon and spreading elsewhere later tonight and tomorrow. Otago and Southland, mainly fine with high cloud, especially tomorrow. However, scattered rain about coastal Southland and Clutha from this evening, becoming confined to Stewart Island tomorrow. Fiordland, rain developing this afternoon with heavy falls, easing later tomorrow. And Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy, chance of a light shower. It's 6:08 and you're listening to RNZ National.
Thanks, Susanna, and you're with Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. The government has put ticket scalpers in its sight with a plan to cap the price anyone can on-sell tickets for. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern and the Commerce Minister Chris Farfoy made the announcement this afternoon, saying they will now start seeking feedback from the public. Our political reporter Craig McCulloch has more.
He's a global phenomenon, a rap superstar. Eminem turning out a record number of fans in Wellington, some 46,000 people. But at the stadium gates on Saturday night, a handful found themselves stopped in their tracks, holding tickets that weren't the real deal. Ticketek says fewer than 20 punters bought dud tickets from resellers like Viagogo. Many others bought genuine tickets, but for far more than face value. The government wants to stamp that out.
This is blatantly unfair and not good for consumers nor the organisers.
The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says she's heard terrible stories of people who've been ripped off, and not just for large international artists.
Te Matatini, the National Kapahaka Festival that just recently took place in Wellington, had some tickets being listed for $498. The 4-day pass was originally priced at $100.
Under the law now, there's nothing to stop someone buying a ticket and then selling it on at an astronomical price. The Governor-General can shut down scalping for major events like the Rugby World Cup by putting a price cap on all resales, no more than the original price. But that law is used sparingly and in select cases. The Consumer Affairs Minister, Chris Fafoi, wants to see price caps across the board.
If you look at some of the profit that some people are making off tickets, it's exorbitant, and that is either money that should be staying with the consumer or isn't being passed on to the promoters or the artists, and I think that is a big issue.
Mr Fafoi also wants to ban professional scalpers from using ticket-buying bots to scoop up large numbers of tickets, like what's happened in the United States and the United Kingdom. He's keen too to see more information disclosed by all sellers.
Full disclosure, I went to the Eagles on the weekend and someone in the line when I was leaving Dunedin said no, they bought a ticket for about $200 over the face value and it wasn't the ticket that they were expecting. So if they had the information, they'll be able to be better informed consumers.
The government is seeking feedback over the next 6 weeks. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Craig McCulloch.
A directive for all Canterbury's frontline police to carry pistols has raised debate, with some saying it was a step too far. The move was taken in response to Trek Allen, who the police said was armed and dangerous and linked to another man involved in last Tuesday's shootout with police. Officers returned to patrolling without handguns at their side today after Trek Allen was arrested following a week-long manhunt. And the charges against the 20-year-old show he may have only been using an imitation gun. Katie Todd has more.
The news that frontline police would no longer be carrying pistols came as a relief for Christchurch woman Tanya Didham. She owns a community house in Richmond, about 200 metres from a shootout between police officers and a wanted man last Tuesday. A bullet came through one window, terrifying a community group inside. The officer Ms Didham spoke to on Wednesday thought it was either a panic shot fired by an officer or a bullet that had ricocheted.
I found the bullet earlier in the morning when I came to work. It's like, wow, there's actually something's come through the window here. And he said to me, it's quite likely that in the heat of the moment, with all the adrenaline rushing and it's a car chase and all the rest of it, they've jumped out of the car and they've got their handguns and they're shooting at this assailant who's obviously shooting back at them. So there's a lot of stuff going on and sometimes shots go astray.
The wanted man was shot and taken to hospital in police custody. It was the third time in 72 hours police officers came face to face with people bearing firearms, after guns were presented to officers in 2 separate occasions on the Saturday before. The police say Trek Allen was in the car during those previous 2 incidents. District Commander Superintendent John Price ordered all his frontline police to carry pistols until Mr Allen was found and arrested. He said Mr Allen may be armed and could be a threat to officers. Having seen firsthand the damage one stray bullet can do, Ms Didham says she's concerned the police might not have enough training with firearms to be carrying them on their hips.
I think in New Zealand that we don't want guns on hips. I think it's fine to have guns being carried in cars for these sorts of situations. Obviously it was kind of a weird one-off situation, but I think the key thing is really that if police are going to carry arms, that they need to have really comprehensive training.
The routine carriage of firearms directive was lifted with Trek Allen's arrest on Sunday, and the Police Commissioner, Mike Bush, this morning told RNZ the police are not moving towards routine arming of frontline officers.
Between the public and even my staff, you know, people are split on whether that should happen. But what people need to remember is that will mean that we police totally different. So we police with the consent of the public. Therefore, we've got to take a real trust and confidence lens to this. So that's why we have no intention of moving to the routine arming.
Mike Bush supports the Canterbury District Commander's decision, as does the President of the Police Association, Chris Cahill, who says gun violence is on the rise. Mr. Cahill doesn't think it was an overreaction for the police to start carrying firearms, even if Mr. Allen's gun was a fake.
When officers are confronted with a firearm, they are not able to assess whether it's an imitation or not the majority of the time. So have to treat it as the most dangerous weapon that it could be. Till the inquiry's finished, you don't know all the facts, but working with what they had to take this as a very serious and dangerous matter, and that's what they've done. And that's the right thing to do in the interest of the safety of the public and police officers.
Trek Allen is due to reappear in court in 3 weeks' time. He has been remanded in custody without plea. In Christchurch, for Checkpoint, ko Katie Todd, 10A.
Just 11% of victims of crime report having a positive experience with the justice system. That's according to a new survey that's been released at a workshop attended by 160 victim advocates and experts in Wellington today. It follows on from the Criminal Justice Summit last year, which was criticised for failing to address the needs of victims. Ben Strang was there.
Last August's Criminal Justice Summit in Porirua was criticised for being one-sided, with victims feeling that offenders took centre stage. But today their voices were heard, and the results of the survey of more than 600 people didn't come as a surprise to the government's chief victims advisor, Kim McGregor.
57% said that they had a poor or very poor experience in the criminal justice system, and that's not good enough. They said that they didn't feel safe, that they didn't feel listened to, and they didn't have enough support or information. And we've known that for a very long time.
On top of that, more than 3/4 of victims in the self-selecting survey said they weren't provided with enough information or support, and that their views and concerns weren't listened to. More than 80% believe the criminal justice system isn't safe for victims. Dr. McGregor says many people were at the workshop to listen.
This is an amazing opportunity. We've got a workshop here today. We've got 7 judges who are listening. We've got police, court staff, prosecutors, corrections, parole. I think this is the first time ever we've had all parts of the system together in a workshop working with victims and victim advocates to talk about what are the gaps in the system for victims and what are the solutions.
The Justice Minister, Andrew Little, says what sets victims apart is that they don't choose to be a part of the justice system, and he has first-hand experience of the treatment victims can face. Mr. Little sat through a murder trial in the 1990s in which the father of a friend had been killed and another woman was raped.
I saw for myself how alienating the whole process was for the family. I was a young lawyer. I was naturally sympathetic to the process. The arcane rules of evidence, the dispassionate conduct of the trial, the language and formality devoid barely of any humanity. The family, however, felt left out, and the reality is they were left out.
Andrew Little says the number of victims who feel the system isn't working isn't a surprise, and highlights the size of the issue. Green Party MP Jan Logie, the Undersecretary to the Justice Minister, was also expecting the high numbers.
It is a real call for us to do better, that we want a justice system that lives up to its name, and it's not at the moment.
Kim McGregor wants to see a victims commission set up and that no victim of a crime should have to go through the justice system without support. In Wellington, for Checkpoint, Ben Strang.
Could a reckoning be coming for the king of pop, Michael Jackson? Despite allegations of paedophilia over decades, Jackson's era-defining music remains as popular as ever. Tonight in the United States, the 4-hour film Leaving Neverland screens on HBO, followed by a special hosted by Oprah Winfrey. Previews have already led to calls for boycotts and the Jackson family launching a $100 million lawsuit. The ABC's Connor Duffy reports from Washington.
Even when facing court on paedophilia charges, Michael Jackson's star continued to burn brightly for legions of loyal fans. In the years since his death, this groundbreaking performer is still the highest-grossing dead celebrity, with his mix of pop, soul, disco and funk irresistible to music lovers. Jackson's legacy, though, is colliding with the Me Too movement and a global reckoning for abusers in the church.
Hello, Wade. Today is your birthday, so congratulations. I love you. Goodbye.
The documentary Leaving Neverland follows Brisbane-born Wade Robson and American James Safechuck as they come to terms with alleged abuse from Jackson. The 4-hour film has been hugely anticipated here in the United States, with both men penciled in for interviews with Oprah Winfrey immediately after tonight's premiere.
Everybody wanted to meet Michael or be with Michael. And then he likes you.
I was 7 years old. Michael asked, do you and the family want to come to Neverland?
For me, this moment transcends Michael Jackson. It is much bigger than any one person. This is a moment in time that allows us to see this societal corruption. It's like a scourge on humanity.
Director Dan Reed says the film will be confronting for people who continue to listen to Jackson's upbeat pop hits and will also expand the Me Too movement.
The Me Too movement erupted while we were in production, and it did play a part actually in Wade's mother's decision to take part in the film. She felt like, the time has come.
In 2005, Jackson was acquitted on child sexual abuse charges, and he and his surviving family have always denied the long-standing allegations. Both Wade Robson and James Safechuck previously told authorities Jackson didn't abuse them before later unsuccessfully launching civil action. The Jackson estate has come out swinging, launching a $100 million damages claim against HBO. Michael Jackson's nephew, Taj, and brother Jackie have accused the filmmakers of bias.
When you do something that strong, when you make an allegation that strong, you should get both sides to it to make sure that there's validity and there's truth to it.
Especially when he's not here to defend himself,
Exactly.
And I don't care to see because I know my brother.
Millions of other Americans, and shortly after, many more all around the world, will soon be able to decide the truth for themselves. Early reviews say the trauma and pain left behind by Jackson makes it an agonising watch.
He told me if they ever found out what we were doing, he and I would go to jail.
Connor Duffy reporting there. 18-year-old middle distance prospect Sam Tanner says he believed he could become the youngest New Zealander to achieve a sub-4-minute mile. He broke the elusive barrier in Whanganui on Saturday, beating a record previously held by Nick Willis. Tanner clocked a time of 3:58.41, a fraction of a second behind Australian Rory Hunter, who won the race at the Petersnell International Track meeting. The young athlete described his time as a little ambitious, but says he knew he could do it.
I had a good session on Tuesday, proving that I think I could do it. It was kind of a big goal for me because it was my first mile, and being my first mile, it would have been something special to go under 4 minutes in your first go. So that was a bit of a special moment for me, yeah, definitely.
And happening at the Whanganui Mile, a scene of other great events in the past, and it was at the Petersnell International Track meeting, so that was sort of an added bonus, I guess, for it to happen there.
Yeah, definitely not something I'd thought heaps about. I'm a bit of a frother, so I just wanted to run fast and race some big names. So yeah, it's definitely an honour to race at that track with the history it's had, and yeah, I kind of unexpected and didn't really expect the caps that you got given when you break that sub-4 minute mile. But yeah, I was stoked.
And you came in a fraction of a second behind Australian Rory Hunter, who won the race, but also beat the record that was previously held by your hero Nick Willis.
Yep, that's right. And yeah, that was pretty exciting. That was a real goal, break that record. And if I ran under 4 minutes, that would have been an added bonus, which was awesome too.
So it puts you in good stead for your aim to run at the Tokyo Olympics next year. What do you have to do between now and then?
I think I just have to hit a standard and then get selected. So I believe the standard's around 336, so it's a doable goal with my times at the moment, and if I just increase my training a little bit, and hopefully America does good things for me, and I'll just be able to run really well on their circuit and get them into some fast races and get someone to push me along into getting that time.
When do you head to America?
September this year. It'll be early September this year. I head to the University of Washington, 10 minutes from downtown Seattle.
And that was Sam Tanner talking there to Andrew McRae. A conservation group is trialling the use of drones, battery-powered self-priming traps and infrared cameras ahead of a 1080 drop in Egmont National Park. The Taranaki Moonga project wants to eradicate possums on the Kaitaki Ranges, and it hopes the devices will help keep pest numbers down after the poison is dropped. Our Taranaki Wanganui reporter Robin Martin went to visit a trap line.
The Taranaki Moonga project is a partnership between the Department of Conservation, the 8 Taranaki iwi and the Next Foundation. Set up in 2015 with a kitty of $24 million, it aims to get on top of pest numbers in the national park over the next 20 years and restore bird life to its forests. It plans to surround the Moonga in a virtual halo of trapping devices with the help of other environmental initiatives. But a dawn visit to a trap line on the Kaitaki Ranges illustrates the challenges it faces. The silence is deafening. Project manager Sean Zeltjes says it shouldn't be this way.
It should sound like Rotakari Scenic Reserve. I'm not sure if you've ever been out there in the dawn, but it is a cacophony. It's brilliant to hear. Cody actually sent us a clip of Tiri Tiri Mātangi in the dawn, which this place should be like. It's just it's deafening, mate.
Mr. Zeltjes says monitoring in the Kaitaki Ranges shows possums trigger 45% of the devices set to detect or kill them. The number is even higher for rats, reaching 80%.
It is alarming. We're certainly not anywhere we need to be to achieve the restoration outcomes of the project around returning species. We're working hard to bring kaka and kōkako and kiwi back to this particular part of Kaitaki, and those predators need to be a lot lower than what they are today.
Mr. Zeltjes says before kōkako could be reintroduced into the ranges, those figures would need to drop below 5% generally and below 1% during breeding season. That's where 1080 comes in.
We're coming into the knockdown phase, which there's no secrets here. The aerial 1080 is our best tool for that wide-scale knockdown. The difference here is we're moving to a model basically where there's a lot less gaps in your operation, and therefore you can target all of the possums in that area to completely remove those animals from this part of the landscape.
570 traps have been set in the area spanning 8,000 hectares in the Kaitaki Range, and a virtual barrier of 1,700 traps will be put in around their boundary to prevent reinvasion. This will be supported by the Regional Council's trapping via its Towards a Predator-Free Taranaki initiative. In total, more than 7,000 traps have now been set in the National Park. Dock Field Ranger Cody, who only gave his first name for safety reasons, demonstrated the use of a possum master trap.
You pull this lever down, and there's this cord in here. You pull it down. Up inside there's these two little sort of hooks, and you hook the mesh around it, and then when the possum sticks his head up inside, he triggers that, and then when the trap goes off, it strangles him.
Cody says there are about 150 possum master traps in the Kaitaki Ranges. They're reliable, but they have to be reset after each kill. He says a new battery-powered trap being trialled at the Puakai Ranges virtual barrier could save a lot of work.
Running a trap trial there with a thing called an AT220, which is a trap. Looks like a stoke box, sort of like a Dock 200, sort of weighs the same as well. And basically it lowers itself, and it can reset itself 200 times, and it has the ability to kill possums as well, which is a huge thing for us.
Cody says the new trap wouldn't need to be serviced for a year and shut down during the day to reduce the risk of bykill. Mr. Ziltzis said infrared cameras and possibly even drones will be used along with other devices to monitor and target surviving pests and guard against reinvasion. He acknowledges, however, the challenges faced by the Taranaki Monga project.
At the same time, it's really exciting to be in a region where people have realised that challenge, like Taranaki Regional Council, like these guys, and we're getting stuck into it.
A 1080 pre-feed operation will begin this month, and about 6 weeks later the poison will be dropped. Protesters blocked access to the North Egmont entrance of the park ahead of the last 1080 operation there in 2016. I Taranaki mo te hōtaka o te Ahipone, ko Robin Martin-Aho.
Let's go to some of your feedback now, and the story we did on the government looking to crack down on ticket scalpers. This person says whoever wants to ban bots doesn't understand the internet. They'll just operate from China or Russia or somewhere else. Silly idea. Government is planning to have some kind of legislation that outlaws bots which buy multiples of tickets so they can be resold. Ian says, hi Lisa and team, in all seriousness, what's wrong with ticket scalping? Buy something, sell it on at a higher price. Is this not just the market in action? Capitalism 101, says Ian. Why single out ticket profiteering at all? But this texter says it is really annoying when tickets sell out within 20 minutes, leaving the only option to buy them from people who take advantage of our loose laws to rip us off. Make it criminal to buy bulk and sell at a profit. And just before we go on Mark Taylor, the Kiwi jihadi, this person says we don't want any ISIS scumbags in New Zealand. Let them be stuck in Syria. They will sort them out. Back tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Prime Minister says the Islamic State recruit Mark Taylor has been repeatedly told New Zealand has no diplomatic representation in Syria, so can't help him get travel documents. The former New Zealand soldier is in a Kurdish prison in northern Syria. The government has unveiled plans to target unscrupulous ticket scalpers. The death toll from a tornado in Alabama has risen to 23, with dozens injured. And Dame Jenny Shipley has decided to retire as chair of China Construction Bank New Zealand, a week after she and other directors of Mainzeal were found liable for it trading while insolvent. Our next news is at 7.
RNZ National, with a fresh take on the day's news at 10 every weeknight with Karen Hay.
We learned about this through the media.
Including the latest national and international news from the RNZ News team.
Hit the water and literally almost like slow motion did a cartwheel.
And always live when